and gentlemen, my first album that I'm going to review. It's not expected. I didn't plan this, but I just finished listening to it like an hour ago, and I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna just make a video about it. And that is based on a true story by Will Smith. And let me just start off by saying this album is actually pretty damn good. It's pretty good. A classic or anything? Absolutely not. But most people probably come back and listen to this like over again? Probably not. But it's worth listening to for what it is and the story behind it. And just because it's Will Smith, why not? I'm just gonna be straightforward and real honest. The first half of the songs that's on this album, in order, if you count the interludes and stuff in between in the intro, is the better half. The last half of the album, I would perfectly understand if someone was not into it. These songs, You Looking For Me, Rave in the Wasteland, Bulletproof are my favorites. Hard Times is all right, a little feminine touch with a Teyana Taylor feature. She's a decent singer. Not great by any means, but decent. Beautiful Scars with Big Sean was a fun music video, references to the Matrix, a lot of lyrics throwing back to that time frame. They killed it. It's definitely good stuff here. Tantrum with Will Smith and Jordan Lucas. I know a lot of people who listen to hip hop is probably like, oh, two corny rappers, because a lot of people always talk trash about Jordan Lucas. But hey, what a good throwback, because Jordan Lucas made a song about Will Smith, and he gets to feature on Will Smith's album on his comeback. Then we have First Love, which is a real good take on some Spanish taste music. Got a lot of good guitar going on, got some Spanish language in there. Definitely unique, right? Make It Look Easy, I could care 100% less about that song. I could just take that off. You Can Make It is pretty cheesy, real gospel-y, type of song. So if you're not a fan of stuff like that, fall back. And to me, Work of Art is the best song on the album. It was a single. A lot of people made memes about it. A lot of people joked about it because of like what he rapped about and how he rapped. I don't care. So to keep it short, and then I'm gonna get to my personal take on Will Smith after this, which, hey, if you're here for it, you're here for it. If you're not, all right. I'm just rate this album like about a 7.5 or an 8. It's by no means, like I said in the beginning, it's not a classic. It's not something you'll come back to and listen to over and over again. I would, because I like positive, uplifting, inspirational, motivational music and stuff like that. Do I want to hear all the gospel-y stuff? It can be a bit annoying. It can be cringy to some people. I would agree. I understand that. So, no. But as far as for what it is in today's time, there's not a lot of rappers from the 90s that can capture the sounds of today and make them relevant, or orchestrate their own sounds, and put it together in a way that suits them. It just can't be done. It's not done by a lot of people out of the 90s. Is this album groundbreaking? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But is it worth listening to for what it is? 100%. Bottom line, the pros of this album is just refreshing. It's something different. Will Smith hasn't made an album in over 20 years. He's been featuring and making little songs and little things over the past couple of years. But, it's just something different to hear. Like, I'm a fan of listening to things that don't sound like nobody else. I want to hear people and I want to hear them. I don't want to hear 50 million rappers sound like the same person. I don't want to hear it. I want to hear somebody who sounds different. And I love that. And for exactly what it is and who he is. The cons are, it could be a bit redundant. A lot of gospel-y, preachy, churchy stuff can get on your nerves, right? It could be overly positive and stuff like that. I know people tend to say things like that, preachy, right? That's a con. You might find the bars corny or cringy. I understand, but hey, it's Will Smith again. He's not going to curse a lot. He's not going to be super aggressive and trying to do triple, double entendres and do all this crazy wordplay. But he got smart, deep, spiritual wordplay. And if you're not a person who's into lyrics like that, or you're not a conscious rapper type of listening person, you're not going to like it. You're not going to like it. So to close this out, if you haven't listened to it already, go listen to it, especially if you call yourself a hip-hop fan and you think you like music and stuff like that, and you like rap for what it is and just hearing things and just trying music. Do it. But if you're a closed-minded, you like your all this stupid hype music and all this mumble rap nonsense and street trap music, don't even waste your time. Don't waste your time, because you're not going to find anything. You're not going to find nothing worth listening to at all. You're not. So I'm going to talk a little personal note about Will Smith after this. So my review is done. I'm rating it a 7.5 or an 8. I haven't made up my mind yet. And that's the end of that. So if you want to hear the rest of what I'm saying about Will Smith after this, keep listening. If you're done, you're done. And see you on the next album review. Well, I'm just going to rant a little bit about Will Smith and what made me really want to listen to this album and why I care, right? The thing is like, I always looked up to Will Smith. I always admired, how he does things, how he talks, how he carries himself in interviews and all that throughout the years. You already know a bunch of his movies can't be ignored. They're well known. They're too successful. Like, the list goes on. You can't take away his success in film and television and music. Like, he's unmatched. It's not a lot of people who you can compare Will Smith to, at the time that he came out for what he did. Of course, there's better people that you could say are better actors and had better TV shows and better music. But just for Will Smith, who he is and where he's from, and as a person from Philly, it's a big deal. It matters, and it always will for decades to come, until someone can do what he's done and replicate it and outdo it. He's Will Smith. Regardless of what he's done, regardless of his family problems, we gotta move on with all the things that has happened in his life. Everybody knows this shouldn't have happened. Regardless of what you believe, some people think it was a stunt and it was planned to begin with and all this nonsense. But regardless, this should have never happened. This is not a performance that no one should have seen. This should not have happened at the Oscars, especially after his great win with King Richard. Like, this should have never happened, right? At the same time, it had to happen, because it had to expose the darkness of Will Smith that he loves to hide. That we all like to hide about ourselves. He's just being human. He's just being himself. But as we know, people get with celebrities and we all think that they're like immortal and just the most perfect beings and they can do no wrong, or they should never do no wrong because of who they are. And it's just not true, and it's just not fair. And when I say I'm a Will Smith fan, I'm a fan because, I got his audiobook not too long after it first came out, and I've listened to a lot of chapters on my own. Me and my fiance have sat and listened to many chapters, and we're almost done. But he has such an interesting story, an interesting life. Of course, there's harder, more traumatic, more adversity things to overcome in life, and people have different kind of stories that you might want to hear. But Will Smith is great, and I'm not sitting here to just like make him seem like he's the greatest guy on earth or none of that, but I just respect him, all right? And when you listen to the album that I just reviewed, and when you just watch his growth and his pattern, right, you got to acknowledge it. You got to. He's been going around cleaning things up, talking about his demons and what he had to deal with and what he had to understand, what was going on behind the scenes with his marriage, inside of himself, all kinds of things. Not everybody and not every celebrity especially is willing to go on those journeys and be open about it and acknowledge the mistakes that they have made. So you got to give him his flowers and his props for doing all of that and everything that he has done. Where things will go with Will Smith in the future, we will never know. But all I got to say is he will never lose my respect, unless something else crazy comes out that is like ridiculously unbelievable. But, other than that, the music was good. The album was great. I suggest you listen to it. And just give a man a chance, and let's all just keep watching and see what happens. That's all I can say. Thanks for listening. If you made it all the way to this part of the video, definitely thank you. Be sure to like, comment, share, and all that junk. See you on the next one.